We have two speakers scheduled today. Tim Davis is going to speak first about the history. Is that right? Tim's first?
Allison is going to introduce.
Well, but Tim first? Yeah, okay. Tim is going to talk about the history of the process that we've gone through beforehand, before today, and Helene will bring us up to date on plans for the future. But first I want to have Allison give us a spiritual opening.
So I've been asked to share sort of a centering spiritual message, and the question before us, which I raised in the service a little bit today, is really one of legacy. When we're thinking about our facilities and we're thinking about what's good for us and also a generational sense of that, it's connected to what is our legacy, and for each one of us, what might generosity look like? Those two things help fuel a capital campaign and capital projects. And the story that comes into my mind is meeting Charlene Cotula's daughter. Often when I've been visiting in New York with Unitarian Universalists or at a district or regional Unitarian Universalist gathering, I will see Charlene Cotula's daughter. And she very excitedly tells me the story of her parents and the role that they played in our actually acquiring this mansion. Charlene Cotula, I don't know if she was there from day one, but she was there with us, one of us, within the first 2 years. And 2 years into our history, the fellowship was asking the question about a gathering place for children and youth and adults to be able to worship together, to hold religious education classes, to celebrate our milestones, and to gather to make a difference in the world and to imagine the world that we were building together. So Charlene drove along Normandy Heights Road and saw 21 Normandy Heights Road, this property, a Georgian mansion rising from the top of the hill. And she looked at this place. We were 27 members at the time, hoping to be 100 members, and she thought, we could grow to be 100 members in that building. And the way her daughter tells it, on the spot, she plunked down the down payment. And then the congregation had the meeting to decide whether they would buy the building. Now, we try to do things in the opposite order, but nonetheless, her sense of purpose and possibility that this congregation could grow, could be a leader in Unitarian Universalism in northern New Jersey, and would be here for decades and generations to come was spot on. Around the year 1970, the questions of legacy and generosity again brought us to a place where we asked what was it that we needed for our own ministries as well as for the generations to come. And we had grown far past 100 members, and we're meeting in the terrace room. It was time to add an addition, and the result was this beautiful meeting room, this sanctuary that we meet in for worship and so many events. In the 1980s, again, the questions of legacy and generosity. At that time, we had grown so much in terms of numbers of children and adults who wanted to participate in activities throughout the week that we knocked down the walls. On the third floor, the rooms were servants' quarters, and so they knocked down the walls so that we could have what is now women's space and the meditation room and many of the classrooms in which our children meet on Sunday mornings and adults meet throughout the week. And we, in 2010 and again in 2012 and 13, asked those questions of what would be our legacy and what would generosity propel us to do. And we also created a plan. And I won't share anything about that because we're going to hear a lot about it shortly. But I do want us to be brought back to that image of Charlene's daughter, who was so proud that her parents made a difference in the life of this congregation, and it's rippled well beyond her lifetime. So I like to imagine that 60 years from now, there might be a daughter or granddaughter of people in the fellowship who would excitedly tell the ministers 60 years from now what we did, what in 2018 we felt called to do, and the story of how those new spaces and well cared for places on our property made a difference, not only to us, but a difference that rippled out into the wider community. May it be so.
Thank you, Allison. So for all that know me or not, my name's Tim Davis. I'm the facilities chairperson for the building. If you do know me, you know I love this building and even get a little obsessive about it. But the point was, I think you had touched too on the Eugene Pickett Award.
Right.
And
for growth in stewardship, growth in members,
yes.
and the vitality of our programming.
Yes, and what that spells out for us is that MUF is a vibrant congregation. All right, so what I'd like to do for today is just give you a brief overview of some of our history. We've already touched a little bit on that, but I'd like to catch you up to where we are at this very point, this moment. So a little bit more on the past. In 1912, Thorn Oaks was built by architects Aldrich and Delano. Did a little fun research on these two architects and come to realize that this was during the Golden Age. They had done additional architectural work such as the Truman, I can't remember the name of it, extension off of the Oval Office. They also had done a home for Rockefeller in upstate New York. Some big clients they had, including also 3 very prestigious supper clubs in New York City. So this is truly a historical building, and they are definitely very good architects to be mentioned. But now the facility is 106 years old. In 1957, as Allison spoke about, MUF's original 27 founders bought the mansion. And fast forward past the 70s with this, fast forward past the 80s with the HIP program, we get us to more of our more current timeline. October 2010, the congregation approved a strategic plan to including a goal to establish and maintain a spiritual home that supports our mission and vision, enables our spiritual growth initiatives, including adequate space for worship, lifespan religious education, meetings, functions, and administration. And here's the one that I'm really tying into, is welcoming, safe, and well-maintained. Okay, that's going to be our overarching subject here. So during that time, there was a task force that addressed some of the concerns. Facilities were too small for our congregation. Some of you may have remembered our 50th anniversary. I was not here for that, but Shari mentions that during that celebration, the children were not invited to come just because we couldn't fit them. Last in-gathering, again, we were all praying no rain, but I'm sure you realized, trying to get 200 people to eat here and share one group together was just, we don't have the facility to do that. Also, lack of accessible RE classrooms for all ages. We're not just talking about youth RE, we're also talking about adult RE. Something that's near and dear to my heart is the fact that as an interior designer, it bothers me that we have one non-ADA restroom on the first floor. There's also fire and safety accessibility features that we have some issues with, and many deferred maintenance issues. Our roof, as you all know, our parking lot, it's the first thing people see when they come in, and general building conditions of this 106-year-old building. Last but not least, during that time, I love the stories that Allison tells too, that during certain sermons you could get a radio program that could interfere with the service at the time. So they did want to address the sound and aesthetics in the sanctuary. So these were the concerns back in 2010. November 2011, Sacred Spaces Task Force developed and presented 3 options for considerations. First one, as we know, is remain in the mansion, renovate and expand to meet our needs. Second, and the third, actually had to deal with selling this property and either building a new facility or retrofitting an existing facility. And while they were working on that, they were looking at options having to deal with cost feasibility and complexity of execution and implementation. Remember, during this time, it was, again, we wanted to be a community within the Morristown area. We all know what prices are in this area. And during that time, they did the full comparison. This is a smaller version of what the full report was. But during that time, it came to a congregational vote. That's actually when I was, one of the first times I was here was as a member, was to vote on that, and the congregation overwhelmingly voted to stay. It's funny, just one more anecdote was the fact that as they were going through looking at either selling this property and then having to build new, and where does the community go during that time, or buying and renovating, they were driving up and down Route 10 and seeing these vanilla boxes and getting more and more depressed as they went through them to see what was actually available to us, and then driving back to this facility and seeing our amazing 6 acres and this beautiful building and saying this was almost a no-brainer, and I think the congregation agreed on that. So, point was, after that vote, here's a quick summary of the project timeline that takes us from 2012 to 2018, last August. And I'll go into it a little bit more detail. June 2012, the congregation, as we said, voted to accept, stay and renovate the option, remain in the mansion, and move forward with the needed renovations and expansion required to satisfy and implement the 5-year strategic plan. Remember the concerns for the facilities, how would we address those? Next up, May 2013, Gateways Task Force presented plans necessary to renovate and expand the Gateways Mansion facilities. I'm sure you all remember from that point some of the initial layouts. June 2013, membership approved moving forward with the plans and developed as a result of the Gateways Task Force. In November of 2013, very similar to what we're doing today, a series of focus groups were conducted to make sure that we were in agreement to embark on the capital campaign. It was voted and approved. And for 3 months, the capital campaign between December 2013 and March 2014 was to carry the torch from generation to generation. As Helene will tell you more, that was a very successful campaign. Whoops, go back. One more. Go back. Can you go back? There we go. Congregation authorizes creation and filing of the plans with the zoning board. Here's where it starts to get rough. Notice the dates here, October 2014 to August 2016. Almost 2 years of zoning board hearings and plan approval. Not to dig in too far on this, but this was 2 years of going back to the township to try to get approvals for the zoning. I believe at this point in August 2016, they were basically at 19 meetings that went to the zoning board with input from the Historical Society in Morristown and from some of the neighbors and some of the concerns. This went on more than twice as long as what was expected. And think about this too, every time that there was a zoning board meeting, we're bringing the professionals along with us, the engineers, the architects, and then when there's revisions, those revisions went into the plans as well. So this started to really slow the process down. On the next slide, whoops, not sure that's the next slide. There we go. As we know, after that 19th or 18th meeting, there was a lawsuit filed by the 5 neighbors to block the approved plan based on this covenant that, in a short story, was saying from 1891, this area was only for residential purposes. During that time, during the lawsuit, and actually going through the lawsuit, there was even another additional congregational vote, and it was approved to keep going and defend our approved plan. Finally, April this year, the lawsuit was settled. The covenant is discharged, so as I think David Palmer said at the last meeting, that we are now grounded here. There's nothing that stops us from being a religious organization on this property. And that's basically, in a nutshell, what the lawsuit allows us to maintain. So now, the other side of the coin is we can actually build on the approved plan that was passed through 20-some zoning meetings, and our full set of contract or construction documents are approved by the township. Now, here's the caveat. August 2018, we asked for a 1-year extension because of the lawsuit to start construction, and it was approved by a 3-2 planning board vote. My understanding was that we thought this was going to be a very simple thing. There, go in, get the 5 votes, get out, go on. That was a very narrow margin and made I believe the board paused because of the fact that, you know, if and when this did not get approved, this could be trouble. So we have basically, to this point, and Helene will speak about it a little bit more, we're on this one-year extension to basically get the shovels in the ground. So as the last slide, and then I'll let Helene. Oh, I'm sorry. Having a hard time hearing me? Better? Sorry. So, in conclusion for my portion, what we're trying to say with this history is that it's been a democratic all along, and we're basically following that over the past 8 years from the initial vote to stay at the Gateways Mansion and to use the plans that are now completed to renovate the mansion and expand our facilities. Today is not about reassessing whether we go back to square one. Do we go or do we stay? We're really here basically talking about our phase 1 plan, which the township has approved and is still considered the best way forward. And with that, I will give you Helene.
Hi, my name is Helene Firm. I'm currently on the board at the fellowship. I'm the board member for strategic planning. But I've also, wear a few different hats here. I've also been involved with this project since that initial committee that looked at do we stay or go or what are the options. I'm also, by background, a mechanical engineer and work with buildings systems. So that project called to me and I'm still involved. So today I'm going to walk you through some details about the current plan and also some numbers of where we are with our current funding. And so you can understand and see. I used to have like a pointer, but I will just do my best to point things out here and hopefully guide you with some words. So first I'm going to start with some plans. This is to get approval for a project in Morris Township where we're located. If you have any variances from the zoning rules, you have to go to the zoning board. And we had some minor, small variances, so we did need to get approval for this project. And so the main elements that you see on this plan are you can see we have this almost 6 acres of land. On the top of is the Normandy Heights Road, and on the bottom is Columbia Turnpike. So you now drive in the top right corner to that main parking lot, probably. And then, just gonna go like this. Can everyone hear me? So, the lower right corner is the gravel parking lot from Columbia Road. That would largely remain as is, graded with a smoother entrance. But a big bonus would be a big sign on Columbia Turnpike that are part of our approved plans to announce that we're here, lit at night. Just above that lower parking lot, it says bioretention basin. What that is when you build in New Jersey, New Jersey is a pretty environmentally friendly state as far as all the regulations. You need to, if you're gonna have more paving and more water runoff from paved spaces, you need to collect that water on your site and let that water reseep back into the ground on your site and not go drain off to your neighbors or into the street. So we have a plan that has been designed for improved parking that also includes this basin where the water would collect. It wouldn't normally be filled with water, but it would be filled with nice plantings, and that's one of the many features behind the scenes of a modern parking lot. The parking lot would have new efficient LED style lighting, and you see a lot of little green circles there. Those are new plantings that would be part of the project. Some new and some old, but lots of landscaping. On the left side of the plan is what we call the west parking lot, and that would be a brand new area next to a new building addition. And down in the lower middle points to the children's playground, which would be relocated from where it is now. Where the playground is now, that would be an expanded parking area, and the playground would be on a graded area behind the sanctuary here. And you can see, envision that from that building addition corner, which would be a patio area as well, there would be a line of sight to that playground, so parents having coffee in the fellowship hall could look out and see their children playing in the playground. And at the previous session, we had many families there that have younger children currently, and I saw them all nod their heads appreciatively about that feature. So that gives you an overview of the site plan. You'll see that the garage would be removed next to the neighbors. Also, that side barrier between the end of the parking and the lot would be increased. Right now, it's about 10 feet. It would be increased to 25 feet on that side. And there's about a 50-foot barrier between the new parking on the left side and those neighbors. And overall, we would have less water running off to the neighbors than we do now because of these features. There's also some similar to the bioretention basin, some similar features on the other side of the building, on the other side of the lot for groundwater, stormwater management. Okay, so this shows a plan of the new building addition and how it ties in with our existing building. We're in the sanctuary right now, and the connection point would be through the terrace room, through 2 of the 3 French doors on the west side of the terrace room. The next slide will give us a little more detail of the features that are proposed to be part of this building addition. And if you remember back to that slide that Tim presented about what are our needs, we need accessibility, accessible classrooms, accessible bathrooms, and a gathering space. Those are our 3 big elements, and this building brings that all together, as well as accessible entrance. And again, because we're in New Jersey, and New Jersey has very energy efficient building requirements for any new construction. This would be an efficient facility with insulation, efficient air conditioning, low flow fixtures in the bathrooms. Many, just by complying with building codes in New Jersey, you're building a very modern, efficient building. The top are the 2 classrooms. Those are about 500 square feet each, about 2/3 the size of the terrace room, so nice large spaces. We anticipate having this younger children in those classrooms during Sunday services, the nursery and the preschool, but imagine having an adult RE program in a modern classroom as well. I always like to tell the story of when I used to bring my mom here when she was in assisted living, and she loved Homer Hansen and his paper cutting sessions. And so one night he was offering paper cutting, and I brought my mom over in her walker, and we navigated the ramp. We get inside, and lo and behold, the session wasn't down in the terrace room, but it was upstairs in room 204. And I'm like, oh my goodness, but my mom was determined. So somehow we made it up those stairs and down safely with the walker, but it wasn't easy. So just having an accessible ground floor space is important to me. Bathrooms are the next piece, and then a kitchen, and then this gathering space that we've been calling the fellowship hall, a place where we could serve a meal for 200 or 250 people easily to sit down, a place where we could gather as a larger group for a single service or a memorial service with 300 or 400 people. Really a very flexible space, and right next to the kitchen. So, next slide, please. This is an architect's perspective of what the fellowship hall space might look like. with a higher ceiling, simple but very functional, with carpeted floor and acoustical tile ceiling, and a pass-through access right to the kitchen that's next door, and glass windows. This is the front facade. Some of you may remember an earlier vision that had a more modern glass facade from about 5 or 6 years ago. The neighbors and also the Morris Township Historical Commission weighed in on that vision, and there is a strong preference, especially from the neighbors, the historical people, and the zoning board members, a preference for a more traditional look. And so this is the proposal that was presented at one of the final meetings and kind of approved by, as part of our plan to have a traditional look. Those glass windows with the white frames would look, those would be from those classrooms. Then there would be a glass foyer connecting the two spaces. I think it's really a nice look. Next slide. The rear, however, we have this concept of a glass wall to really connect the space to the outside and vice versa. And this place that's shown with grass, that would likely be paved as a patio. And a patio that would wrap around the edge of the building and look down the hill behind us. As we know, we have this beautiful property here, but right now we can't see that really from where we are, but this would give us that ability. If you can see, look really closely in this architect's perspective, you can see a hint of a playground through the windows. That was an earlier vision. The playground would be, as we showed on that site plan, behind us here. The roof, doesn't that roof look nice in that drawing there? The roof is part of our vision for the fellowship, for these improvements. It is not, however, part of the zoning board approval piece. So we'll talk about that a little more in a minute. Next slide. Okay, so now we'll turn to some numbers, so bear with me here. I want to review where we are with our original capital campaign, what we've raised, what we've spent, and where we see our new needs are, and and the timing. We'll go through all those things. So if you were here in 2013 to 14, you may recall the capital campaign, and this was the goal for the phase 1 at that time, about $3.2 million. And we had a very successful capital campaign. We raised about $2.3 million in pledges from our members and friends. And we have collected most of that. We've collected over $1.8 million of that. And it turns out that the way people judge successful campaigns for churches, capital campaigns, is you look at how much you raise compared to how much is your annual giving and pledges for the congregation. It turns out this was about 5 times our annual giving in pledges was the capital campaign pledges. And that is a hugely successful capital campaign by any standard. And I want to take this moment to thank everyone who was part of that effort, who helped out with the volunteering and who gave their money to that effort. Really successful. And at the time, we had a plan to get to that $3.2 million to do our whole project. And there was a plan to continue with the final phases of a campaign and perhaps borrow some money, look for grants, but all these delays with the zoning board and the lawsuit kind of sidetracked us from that. So, and now we're going to go forward from there. But I want to recap the money that was donated, where we are today with that money. This was presented briefly at the annual meeting this spring. This goes into a little more detail. As we've said, the lawsuit was was a huge expense. It took a lot of time, and it cost over $600,000 in legal expenses to defend ourselves in this lawsuit. The zoning board process also cost more than we expected. We ended up spending about twice what we expected in professional fees for architects and engineers and legal help during the development of the project because of this extended zoning board period where we had to bring in professionals multiple times because we didn't have time, we weren't given time on the agenda, or we had neighbors with lawyers kind of stonewalling us and delay tactics. So that was a big expense. We have been able to make some improvements with that capital campaign money. This room is our great example. This sound system, the chairs, the carpet, paint, we really were able to make a nice improvement to the features of our sanctuary. And also the Room 100 improvements were partly funded through the capital campaign. There were also some other improvements that, some roof repairs that were necessary at the time, and some tie-ins to the street because the street was repaved on Normandy Heights Parkway about 2 years ago. So we had to do some utility tie-ins at that time, and as you might remember, we relocated where the curb cut is, where our main entrance is, to the main parking lot at that time. So those expenses will help us better do our parking lot as we go forward. Another major item on this list of expenses that I wanted to take time to mention was the expense for hiring a full-time fundraising consultant to help us raise the money. We did that previously, and it was really the help of the consultant that was credited to a large part with the success of our campaign, the amount we raised because of the process we used and the help we got with that. And I did want to take a moment to introduce in the back Mr. Ray Sim, who's raising his hand. Ray is a consultant from the Clote company that helped us with the previous campaign, and he's been here. The board hired him for these 4 weeks of this focus group period, and he's been helping us with these presentations, and not only just pushing the button there like you see, but a whole lot behind the scenes of collecting the data from the questionnaires that you have to help us really understand what people are thinking. Are we ready to go forward with this project? Are we ready for another capital campaign at this time? So the bottom line is we've spent about a little under $1.5 million from the original capital campaign budget, and we have in the bank about $400,000 of cash on hand. Plus we have, as we mentioned, over $300,000 of pledges from that original campaign that we still expect to come in, and we'll talk about that in a minute. And just to recap what we've accomplished: the zoning board approval for the parking lot and the Fellowship Hall addition, the improvements that we've done in the interior, and along with that zoning board approval, we have the construction drawings all ready to go for all the site work, the parking lot, the stormwater improvements that I mentioned, the lighting, the landscaping. That's all. We have a set of about 20 drawings that's ready to go, and we've actually gotten some good price estimates from that in the past couple of months. And we have defended ourselves to be here as a religious institution on this property. That's what we gained from the lawsuit settlement. We did not pay the neighbors anything in the settlement. We actually agreed to a few conditions of use, but basically those are conditions that really go along with us being a good neighbor Things like we'll leave the building by a certain time. Some of these conditions that you may be hearing about were conditions that were agreed to in the zoning board approval. So actually the lawsuit settlement really added, the neighbors really got very little more in the end from their expense and our expense, but we have won the right to be here, and we've ended the neighbor's ability to challenge us based on that restrictive covenant. And again, in July, we obtained this one-year extension on our zoning board approval, and right now we have approval through August of 2019. So we have a few photos to remind you of some of the accomplishments from the capital campaign. This is the before of Room 100. And that might look like Tim, but it's actually his brother there that he put to work. And of course, the beautiful room that we have now. And then the next slide. Some of you may remember what this room looked like before. That's an even older carpet than the last carpet, but those old blue clanky chairs, and this AV system, really nice improvements. So this zoning board approval, it's come up a couple times. It really is really a important piece to understand as to why we have an urgency to go ahead now and not wait a year or two to raise money. We have this zoning board approval in hand for the project. In theory, we could get 2 more one-year extensions past next year. But the fact that the vote this time was only 3-2, we're a little hesitant that we might get further approvals. And so we really feel it's in our best interest to get started as soon as possible, and we really want to get these improvements started, get a safe parking lot sooner than later. And along with that approval, though, comes a time from when we need to complete the project. Once we start, we have to complete within 3 years. A more typical time frame for a project is 18 months. And originally we had an 18-month window to complete our project. When we went back for this one-year extension, the zoning board and the township engineer understood that we had this lawsuit and that we might make sense for us to do this to help with our fundraising, to do the project in 2 phases and do the large parking lot first, and then a year or so later, finish the fellowship hall. And each of those projects separately, the time frame for the construction should be well less than a year for each of those pieces individually. So we have approval once we start that we need to complete within 3 years for those 2 elements, the fellowship hall and the parking. This is a list of our needs and opportunities that the board and the Gateways Task Force feel are our most pressing needs at this time that we'd like to include and as a vision, as a goal. The parking lot and the fellowship hall, but also some other improvements to our building. Just as 5 years ago, this sanctuary improvements raised to the top of the list of priorities for our building. What we see now as priorities are a repair to the kitchen porch, where the concrete is literally falling off. Also, our beautiful big doors on the ground floor. A lot of them are in very poor condition. We anticipate doing some new storm doors for those. And even all our windows are desperately in need of a painting of the wood to preserve the wood on our windows upstairs. The RE classrooms on the 2nd floor, if you've ever run a program up there, they have very few electrical outlets or modern amenities. So we have a proposal to bring some additional power up to a few classrooms on the 2nd floor that would enable more easily more modern use of modern AV equipment, and also potentially provide some air conditioning to a couple of those rooms to make them more usable spaces. Let's see, the roof I mentioned already is part of this package of items. That is replacing the tile roof on our main building. Also, we have a commitment to the Morris Township Fire Marshal to put wired smoke detectors on the 2nd and 3rd floor of the main building, because we don't have those there now. And relocating the playground, the nice sign down on Columbia Turnpike that we mentioned when we looked at that site plan. A lot of landscaping, and the shed that's listed there, because we're getting rid of that old garage over on the side of the parking lot, we anticipate putting a small shed in the kitchen courtyard. And by the way, the kitchen courtyard that now floods, that would totally be repaved and part of the parking lot plan. That's part of the plan. So that's at the top of the board's list at this point. I've included a few other items at the bottom as future items that were discussed over the past 10 years but are not at the top of our list today. One would be, a further expansion of this space, and the other thing would be additional improvements to the mansion. At one point there was a concept of adding elevators to the mansion. One problem with, and it's come up in other sessions, is why aren't we renovating the inside of the mansion? And one of the reasons is it's really expensive to renovate that building, partly because once you start doing a renovation in an existing building, you need to bring the whole building up to a certain level of code compliance, modern compliance, and it was recommended to us by our professionals that we were working with, it's better to put the spaces you need in a separate building. That's why the bathrooms are in the separate building, but they'll still be easily accessible to the main building. So just another couple visuals to remind us that we need better parking and a roof. And this slide brings us to how soon are we going to do this? What's our timeline? And again, things keep getting tied back to this zoning board approval to start within 1 year and then finish within 3 years of starting for the parking lot and the fellowship hall. We would expect we would start the parking lot on the east side first as the first phase, and then a year or so later start the fellowship hall addition. Before we do the parking lot, we would do that kitchen porch repair, and then as part of the parking lot, the playground would get relocated to the back, and then the fellowship hall addition, the rest of the parking lot would be done within 3 years after that. So that's about a 4 years from now time frame that we're talking about. Within that time frame, we hope to do these other improvements as well. The exact timing of the other items will depend on our funding flow and other issues, but you can see there, we've kind of laid out a goal of 4 years from now, having a largely completed vision. Next slide. Okay, so what is it going to cost? This is our best estimate at this time of our project costs. The east parking lot includes not just the parking, but all that stormwater management, the lights, the landscaping for the whole eastern half, like out this window to your left, and includes the kitchen porch repair as well, $985,000. Our best estimate for the building addition and the west parking lot would be most of the work out This window is about $2.2 million. That includes the building and the parking and the stormwater on that side. Where we have the grounds work all designed, the building itself, we have our concept for. We don't have detailed design plans, but we have worked with 3 different construction management companies over the past 5 or 6 years and gotten cost estimates for our project. And we've re-looked at those costs this summer with our architect that's been working with us for many years, and that's where these, this estimate comes from that we're comfortable with. Those additional upgrades to this building, the roof, the windows, the French door repairs, we have an allowance for there. For the roof, we feel is about $250,000. We had a cost estimate a few years ago for $200,000, so things have been getting more expensive. So we've made allowances for that. The fire alarm system will cost about $50,000, and then we've added in another $100,000 for those other building upgrades that we would love to be able to do. As I mentioned, the building itself, we still need to do the final detailed design plans for that, the architect, the engineer, and we have an allowance for that cost and permitting fees associated with constructing the building of about $200,000. Below that is a contingency number, about 10% of the building cost, and then an allowance for hiring a capital campaign consultant to work with us, again, as explained as we did with the previous campaign. That comes to about $4.2 million of needs. We have, though, the $400,000 on hand, and as well, we anticipate over $300,000 in pledges from the original campaign still coming in. For different reasons, people have told us they haven't fulfilled their pledge yet, but they still plan to fulfill it. I think I know that that delay with the zoning board and the lawsuit held some people back from giving the money with the timeline they first expected. But if we account for that money on hand and expected money, that gives us a project goal of about $3.4 million. So I hope this has helped you see the big picture of where we've been and how we got to where we are, and where the board is really excited about this vision and these needs, and we really feel that the time is now to go ahead with a capital campaign to help us get to fulfilling this vision. So next week, on Sunday, September 23rd, there will be a congregational vote asking the question, do you support going ahead with a capital campaign? The exact language you will see if you're a member or friend in an email. You'll also be getting, if you're a member if you've signed the book, you'll be getting a letter in the mail with the wording of the resolution. And we are really hoping to answer questions at these focus group meetings, and next Sunday not have a lengthy discussion, but this will be the question that will be called. So at this time, we'd love to collect your thoughts and questions, ideas. Toby's gonna record, and can't emphasize enough that we are really excited to get your feedback, whether it's what you write on your questionnaire or ask aloud. And all that information is being collected by Ray. That's a big part of what he's helped us with, is as we've had these meetings, he's tabulating all the questions and answers, and we are putting it into a report that will be delivered to the board tomorrow, and then we're going to turn it around and get it out to the congregation, so people have, before this vote next week, in addition, thank you for coming today, there will be, and thank you, Gabor in the back is recording this session. We're going to be able to put this recorded session online. The slides will be available, and the Ray Sims report with all the questions and tabulating the responses will be available, as well as the Q&A is documented. Questions? Roxanne? And we're just going to pass, since we're recording this, we're going to pass around the mic for questions. Thanks.
On the parking, I would like us to start it a little before summer. It seems to be pushing the deadlines. Like,
Oh, you're exactly right. So that's our deadline is August. Hopefully we'll be able to get started. If we see January, February, March timeframe that we have a way to fund it, and we have a lot of those funds already on hand, but not quite enough to get started this summer. We would get the contract let in the spring, so we would get underway and have most of that work done during the summer when we're not here.
okay, I mean, I should think they could start retention basins even if it's not great weather, and I don't know. Okay, my second question was, when they're redoing that whole parking area, where do we park? Or are they gonna do it in pieces, or how does that work?
That's a good question. Hopefully a lot of it will be done in the summer when there aren't as many people here, but, you know, actually, as you may know, like, more and more people have been coming here in the summer lately, which is great. We are discouraged from parking in the street, but we are still allowed to park in the street if we need to. And we expect that left side parking lot, the west parking lot, we wouldn't build that right away, but we might open up that area and lay down some gravel to have a small temporary parking that's closer. In the past, we've had a arrangement with the Morris Museum that we can use their lot as well. Some of the rental spaces, people might need to temporarily relocate during that space if it doesn't work out.
Thanks so much for a very thorough and comprehensive presentation. I do have a question. Has there been thinking about what will be done if we can't reach the goal that's projected now? How will we be able to move forward with what kind of cutbacks to what parts of the project?
That's a good question. We really need to wait and see what we raise before we can make decisions. I would say we're very close to having enough funds and likely to go ahead with this phase 1 parking lot first, because for a lot of reasons. We feel that there would be a lot of excitement and about getting some progress, and also the safety issues around the parking lot are a big concern to people. And we really feel that once we get progress and we have a more welcoming, spot for people, that would attract people as well. But we'll have to really see what makes sense. And I guess that's my best answer right now.
Are you notifying the people that didn't do their initial commitments to see whether they're coming in?
That would be part of this campaign. There's a small group of people that have been managing that capital campaign fund, and many people have volunteered that information to us and said, and some substantial givers have said, I know I haven't done my pledge, but I'm good for my pledge.
I just want to mention that a lot of us that are retired, we really don't exactly what the new tax structure is going to do to us, and it's hard to make some estimates.
Yeah, I appreciate that, and one thing that was suggested to us in getting started sooner than later is that this year might be, for some, especially some retired people, like end of the year giving for this year may be a time that's a more beneficial time than next year, for example, to give, so.
On the east, I think I can talk louder enough.
No, because we're recording it, Jackie, if you could, okay, thanks.
The east parking lot, are the trees going to all be cut down and new plantings put in when the parking lot is constructed?
There are a number of trees that will need to come down for the parking lot. So the trees that you see in the medians there, in the middle of the parking lot, those will all be new trees.
Those what?
Those will be new trees.
Why? We have very large established trees. It would be impossible to plant ones that size. Why can't we use what we have and work around them?
Well, we've done a survey of all the plantings, of all our existing trees, and we've done our best to save what we can. But this new parking lot will be a significant regrading of the level of the parking lot. Because if you go outside and walk out to the parking lot today, and think about, look and see how level it looks. There's a lot of different levels that have to be evened out to make a modern.
That's all right. You can put circles around the trees so the level can go up and down. The trees are been established, some of them for 100 years. I'd hate to see them come down.
Well, like I said, we spend a lot of time with our professionals considering that, and we've.
Professionals love to spend money. That word bothers me these days.
Well, we have a plan, and we're doing the best we can to. All I can say is we're saving as much as we can, but at the same time, a modern parking lot needs to consider being able to easily maintain it and plow snow and different things like that. At the same time, when you build something in New Jersey, and in the township, we have a tree survey that was done, and then there's right on the plans, it shows we're taking down this many trees, and this is how many trees we're planting to replace those trees.
It's terribly expensive to plant full-grown trees, and I'm sure they'll recommend very small ones. The other question I have is the west parking lot. Will all that woods be taken down? How much of it could be saved?
There's at least a 50-foot area between our property line and the parking lot that will all be saved.
That's good.
Yes.
And how much larger will this room be?
This room is not going to change. This room is staying
It'll
this.
stay this size?
Yes.
Will this be our main meeting room?
Yes. These are great questions, Jackie. This will remain our main sanctuary meeting room.
And the walls are not going to be expanded out, and the ceiling isn't going to be?
Not at this time. Not at this time. This fellowship hall room could also be used for services. Could also be used for gatherings, large memorial services. But this would likely remain our main Sunday sanctuary.
And what about the idea of doing it in pieces, so you pay for it as you go?
Well, that is essentially what we're going to need to.
Because if you start borrowing money, it's going to get much more expensive. Every year it gets much more expensive. But then if you're borrowing money on top of that, it's going to take the cost of it and just zoom it.
Well, that's, we are going to do it likely in phases as we collect the money. We may need to borrow money. We do have an important announcement that will be publicized more widely soon, but we had a recent donation from a member's family of $200,000 that went to pay down our existing mortgage. So we have now went from having a mortgage of $320-something thousand to just over $100,000. So that has really given our start to this effort a boost in the sense that we're going forward with raising more funds with very little loans right now. So if we need to take out loans in the future, we expect we would be received as more financially able to do that, and it wouldn't be as much of a burden going forward. But that $200,000 gift not only pays down the loan, but it's going to save over $50,000 in interest payments over the next 5 years towards our existing loan. So that's a very generous gift that's really getting us started with this effort. Thank you, Jackie. Roxanne?
This is a big one.
Okay, wait for the mic.
This is a big one, but we've been told that our congregation is growing and we need more space. But my observations are that, thank goodness, we have a lot of wonderful new members, younger members, but my generation's all dying off. There's a memorial service almost every week. Are we really growing? Do we really? Very seldom is this place really full.
So we have our population has been fairly steady, I would say, over the past 5 or 10 years. But but on the other hand, we're always having new people come and as people leave for different reasons. I believe we have over 70 or 80 people that are new since we did the capital campaign 5 years ago that were not part of that capital campaign. New members that really represent the future of our congregation. And I don't know if you were here this morning at the 9 o'clock service. Kathy Solu gave a bit of a testimonial about these gatherings and had like 4 different families that had 3 generations of members here this morning for Sunday school. So I think that's was exciting to see.
Hi. So the new building is all ADA compliant, I assume?
Yes.
And the old building, you said that you would be working on the bathrooms. I think you said.
No, the bathrooms would be, the new bathrooms would be in the new building, but
Okay.
they would be easily accessible from this building through the terrace room.
So no work on the older building to be ADA compliant?
Not at this time.
Okay, that was my question.
A smaller project that's been talked about lately is, can we make a better path to have people come into the meeting room from one of these side doors down to the ground level with, find a way to get more accessibility in the meeting room.
And you had said that also meant no elevator or anything in the older building?
That's right.
Okay. So I'm just interested, that's a flat roof, is it?
Yes.
It looks like it in the pictures.
Yes.
And that's maintenance, easy maintenance on a flat roof?
Yeah, it turns out that modern flat roofs, they have like a membrane, modern materials, a membrane that lasts for like 20 years or so, and that's the industry standard for like a commercial building. You would build it with a flat roof.
And not a problem with snow load and all that?
That would be designed into the building.
Okay. And is there an intention to use the new building for more rentals also?
That's a great question. Our recent policy as a congregation has been to focus our rentals on groups that are in line with our values and focusing on, I'm looking for the term, for nonprofit organizations. And that was, there was a big discussion around rentals at these zoning board meetings. There was a fear that we were gonna become like a rental hall with this building. And we explained that, no, we need this building now because we have the need for it. Last weekend, on that rainy opening Sunday, it was pretty tight here trying to find a space for everyone to eat. But we agreed that we would continue to rent only to nonprofit, largely nonprofit organizations, and also that for wedding receptions and events like that, would only be those connected with a Unitarian Universalist function. So at the same time, there are a number of nonprofits in the area. Of course, we already, our space is used by the AA, by the Folk Project, a lot of different organizations, and we would continue that, and there might be some expansion of that. The primary reason is to have the space for us, but likely that would be an opportunity.
It just seems like it would be helpful for income if you needed to have that, so.
Yeah, it's not something we're counting on, but we would be surprised if people didn't find it an attractive place to use. You want to pass the microphone to Allison, please?
And just a super quick response connected to that question, because of what I do as your minister, is that a lot of people who want to have their weddings, members of the fellowship here, can't and don't, and actually pay, rent other places, because if they were to hold their wedding in the sanctuary, where would they put the people afterwards? So I just wanted to lift that up. So there might be ways that we aren't using it now that we might be able to use it. Although this is a lovely place to get married. I don't want to discourage you. But if your reception is as big as the people in this room, it will be nice to have that addition.
I'm just curious whether there is a plan to put an AV system into the fellowship hall. Is that a detail that's been considered, or is that premature to talk about that?
That is a great idea. That level of detail has not been planned out. I would say that is not a line item at this time that's budgeted for, but definitely something that would be needed.
Well, it's something going to have, so whether it's budgeted now or not, it's going to have to be there.
Yes, I think we're, okay, Howie?
Has any thought been given to, given the anticipated size of this edifice, so to speak, any thought been given to perhaps a new name for our congregation, such as Morris Unitarian Fellowship or some such thing, given county?
That's something that's come up before. One thing, I should say, that's a nice segue. One thing that our current board has committed to for this calendar year is beyond this fall focus on fundraising, in the spring is a focus on the larger strategic vision for the congregation going forward, and I could see that being something that could be brought up at that time. I do want to give people time. I really encourage you to fill out your questionnaire today and give it to Ray, because this is our last focus group. We've had over 150 people attend these focus groups, maybe up to near 160. I'm not sure of our number. And Ray has been entering this every day that we have a meeting. He enters all the data, but this is our last day to wrap this all up. So I really appreciate you coming today. And
So these must be done today?
yes,
Is that what you're saying?
yeah, if you
Okay.
want them to be part of the survey, they have to be done today. And like I said, do look for communications that will help you have more information before next Sunday. I turned mine in today. So thank you again. I really appreciate everyone taking the time.